back to Lex Reads. So in today's video, I wanted to talk about short books. I wanted to give you guys some short book recommendations. I know when I first started getting into reading, that was one thing that I gravitated towards with, reading books that had like 100 pages or less, because I was still trying to flex that muscle of, sitting down and reading a book, because it does take a lot of concentration. And even like today, if I want to squeeze in like one more book, or just kind of get my juices flowing if I have been in a reading slump, I will pick up a shorter book. It helps me, jumpstart my reading. So I want to share a couple with you. Some of them are new authors to me that I read for the first time and would be more than willing to read more of their books. And the rest are just books by authors that I've, read their previous work. So yes, let's just get started. First, I'm going to start with a classic, which you guys know, classics for me has always been kind of a bore, but this year I was able to get into some, and this one in particular I honestly enjoyed. It is Silas Marner by George Elliot. This is like 170 something pages, and as you can see, I tabbed it. This classic was not boring. You have a young man. He is a weaver, I believe. Is it a weaver? Yeah. And the only thing he does is he does his job. He comes back home and counts his gold. That's like his pride and joy. One day it is stolen and he doesn't know what to do with himself, okay? And he's just brokenhearted, okay? One day a young baby shows up on his doorstep, and they're kind of like, well, and the town's like, well, maybe we should, explore some other options. He's like, no, I want to take care of the baby, because they're thinking like, you are older, single man. Why do you want to be bogged down with a child? But he grows to love the child, and it is so good, okay? And when you find out what happened to his gold and who took it and all that, so good. Also, the tea with the mama, the tea with the parents. But yeah, this is a classic I would recommend. Next, this is an author that I discovered this year. Well, read his works for the first time this year. I've known about him, but I didn't read his works before. And y'all already know who I'm probably gonna say. Truman Capote. I went through a little phase of Truman Capote earlier this year. I actually did a reading vlog, read a book in one day, on this book, Answered Prayers, because this, once again, all the tea. And I got into him because of the FX show that was talking about, his life and his friend's life and how he portrayed them by writing a couple of short stories in a magazine. And years later, they put the collection of short stories, it was only 3, they put them in a book because he never finished them. And this, oh my goodness, it was so good. I will put the video down below, because I read some passages and go into like the drama and tea of what he did to his friends. And then Breakfast at Tiffany's, I wanted to read this because I had seen the film. I'm not really a big fan of that movie, to be honest with you. I just like of course I love the clothing, and it's Audrey Hepburn, but the movie is way less grittier than the book. Like Holly Golightly, in the movie, they kind of discreet with her occupation. She's a prostitute. That's what she is. And the book, it says some things, and yeah. But like I said, because I saw the movie, I did want to read the book, and it was good. I enjoyed it. Next, one of my favorite books of all times. This is probably the only book that I really loved when I was in high school, because it was mandatory my junior year, and it is F. Scott Fitzgerald, The Great Gatsby. This book, I still cannot get over that this book is 180 pages, and it tells such a, how do you even describe this story? Beyond gripping. The way that Fitzgerald wrote this book and the characters, they're memorable characters. You will never forget Daisy. You cannot forget Jay Gatsby. You can't forget, the Buchanans. No one, you can't. And again, the fact that this book is so small, and it's so much stuff that happens in the book. And I really like the newest movie that came out with Leonardo DiCaprio. Fantastic. Okay, next is a slave narrative, and it is Harriet Jacobs' Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl. And this book is 160 something pages. And although it's a slave narrative, so you already know it's going to be hard to read, I know when I read it, she just gave me so much courage, because The fact that, you know, you had to basically hide in like an attic for years, and just to be enslaved and not being able to see your children and being, you know, violated. This slave narrative is one of my favorites. And I am I hate to say fan of slave narratives because it sounds like, but I read, you know, enslaved narratives and I do tend to enjoy them. So, yeah. Next is Toni Morrison's Home. Now, this actually was the first book I read in one day a couple years ago, before I was even doing that, because I remember I wanted to see if I could. And this one is I think this is, no, it's not her last piece of fiction. God Help the Child is. This is like her second to last piece of fiction. The reason why I really enjoyed this book is it gives you a perspective on a black man that fought in the Korean War, and I had no idea that that even existed. I don't know a lot about the Korean War, so that was one reason why I wanted to read this. And then another thing too, during that time period, there was a lot of black women in the medical field where the doctors and, you know, the doctors would basically experiment on them and their bodies and, you know, health issues. And his younger sister Cece, she is a victim of that, where it almost kills her. And, you know, she highlights and talks about that. And I love the take that she did when it does come to a veteran, how, you know, some people forget that these vets, they are fighting for our lives, fighting for our country, and they come back and they have nothing a lot of time. And you just see how they deal with it. A lot of times, you know, a lot of those vets, they deal with, you know, alcoholism, because it's a way to cope and get through everything that they have seen, because we can't even imagine what they have seen, heard, and everything that goes along with being a veteran, that goes along with fighting wars. So I love the way that she depicted this. Next is another one of my favorites. It is The Women of Brewsters Place by Gloria Naylor. The reason why I love this is it gives you kind of like short stories when you read it, because you learn and are introduced to each one of the characters. And there's about 7 or 8 characters, I want to say, in this book. And you learn how the characters came to the Brewster projects. And there's usually a challenge of how they got there. And I would say, out of all of the characters, I don't even think I have a favorite, because everyone was just fantastic. Now, I will say, there is a scene with a character that it's very brutal. Okay, it's a sexual aspect, and the way that she wrote it, it was very detailed. It was kind of hard, very hard to read it, but it was necessary in the story, because when you read it, I'm being around the bush, but if you have read it, you know what I'm talking about. And then lastly, of course, I have to mention J. California Cooper. If you want a quick read, but you want something that is entertaining, you need to pick up a J. California Cooper book. She writes short stories and novels. I'm currently reading her novel, The Wake of the Wind, and I'm really loving it. But I am a fan of her short stories. Her short stories, they're clever, but they're also gives you the vibe of I told you so, or that's what you get. And her dialogue, it's like you're talking to like your grandmama, your sister, you know, your homegirl. It's real relatable. And I think especially if you are a black individual, you can relate to it even more, a black woman. And I love that dialogue. You guys know I always talk about dialogue when it comes to books, because that's just my favorite. And she knows how to write dialogue. Pieces of Mine, this is her first ever short story collection, and Alice Walker is the one that put her on. Her short stories, I would say, by far is one of my favorite. If you are looking to get into short stories by, you know, a black individual, or not even just a black individual, if you're just looking to get into short stories, I would highly recommend J. California Cooper. She has so many, but yeah, she is number one. So yeah, guys, that is it when it comes to some shorter novels. Again, I always love a short novel. I told you guys earlier, if I ever am in a reading slump, I pick that up and it really does get my juices flowing. So yeah, short books are the way to go. Yeah, guys, that's all I have for you. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll be back with more black books.